Everyone doing tonight? Thank you for joining me. I am here for you. See, you. It's what I'm here for tonight. Sorry I missed you guys last week. Had some things come up, business that needed to be taken care of. Mischief has been managed, well, to the best of our ability, at any rate. More things to come on that, but that's not what I'm here to talk about tonight. So let's go ahead and get things started. Top of the list, Liz Cheney lost her bid for re-election. She lost in the Wyoming primaries, mind you. And this one's particularly interesting because the individual who she beat out ran on a hardcore pro-Trump platform, which 2 years ago, she ran diametrically opposed. 2 years ago, Liz Cheney's opponent said, never Trump her. 2 years later, she's running against Liz Cheney again. Always Trumper, super Trumper. And that's who replaced her. Somebody who's rather fickle on the allegiances and the alliances and what their values are. No surprise. Welcome to politics in the United States of America these days, folks. It is what it is. And it's the reason why we insist on dump the incumbents again and again and again. Because it's the incumbents that continue to create the problem. And again, those individuals like Liz Cheney's opponent, who are perpetual candidates, perpetual politicians running for office. Yeah, I know. I fall into that category too. This is year number 5 of me running for office. Well, yeah, we'll see how that goes. Okay, now, one of the big things behind this story is that Liz Cheney has been running hard on the anti-Trump train for about, 2 years, 4 years now. She's been big into trying to make sure that Trump has been properly prosecuted for his involvement in mismanagement of the executive branch. Continues to fight that. Now, it's interesting. You end up talking with an awful lot of Democrats that go, well, Liz managed to redeem herself, at least in some quantity, because she did come out hard. She stood by her values, whatever those happen to be. There's an awful lot of us, like myself, regardless of our feelings about Trump and Biden and many of the other incumbents, the politicians and robber barons that have fought for control over the United States for, hundreds of years. There's the aspect of Liz Cheney is the war hawk. Liz Cheney, Dick Cheney's daughter, running off to Wyoming to get elected on Wyoming's ballot. Now, she's not a Wyoming native. There was no reason for her to go to Wyoming, except to get into politics with relatively low, and this is a problem that we have in an awful lot of the Western states, especially in Western states that are known for their libertarian leanings. Most of us who express libertarian views, it's a live and let live. Okay. Look that up. Starting in August, there is an organization. It's libertarian leaning. It is called the Live and Let Live. And the entire idea behind that is you don't bother me, I don't bother you. As long as we aren't hurting anybody and you aren't hurting anybody, nobody should have any problems with each other. Right? Easy. So it would seem. But regardless, in a lot of the Western states, Colorado, Arizona, Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, we have this strong thing of, we're native and chances of us ever actually interfering or dealing with law enforcement in any way, any capacity is fairly limited. And as long as the sheriff's not arresting the local kids, everything's good. We don't run for office. We don't fight for control because we don't think there's anything to control. And in a lot of ways, that ends up with individuals who come from out of state. They run unopposed. They run on platforms that's like wackadoodle. Yeah, wackadoodle, that is a word, folks. Run on platforms that are wackadoodle. And they get elected by about the 30% that even care what goes on inside the legislative offices here in Idaho and Wyoming and, a lot of these other locations. Now, all of a sudden, you have people with very radical views We're now in charge of the way our tax money is spent, in charge of our liberties, in charge of our rights, and they're involved in politics for a nation, for a region, for a state that they don't truly represent because they weren't raised here. They don't understand what is the Idaho way or the Wyoming way or the Montana way. They're just radicals with an agenda from somewhere else who decided to come to your state and tell you how you're going to live. Okay, so from a dump the incumbents perspective, now there were an awful lot of changes that happened over 2020, 2021, 2022, especially 2022. Okay, in the state of Idaho, March 13th was the last day you could file to run for a state or national office. Guess how much changed in the political landscape after they closed those options down? March 11th, things hunky-dory, right? We still have Roe versus Wade. It's going to be around for a while. You know, we still have a Libertarian Party that hasn't dealt with the Reno reset yet. We still have Joe Biden, and he hasn't issued any condemning legislation or executive orders quite yet. You know, we have a Supreme Court, right? A Supreme Court that's going to uphold Roe versus Wade because they promised that, right? They promised that when they said, you know, no, that's set. That's set. It's going to hold on and stick around for a while. Well, yeah. It's not the individual states. It is the United States. 50 stars, 50 stars. That's what's on that flag behind me. 50 stars. Federalism. The idea that each of those states is actually capable of sustaining and functioning and operating in and of itself while supporting the human rights. Right? I don't know that we'll ever have a libertarian president. You know, we can talk about it. You know, we had the first Republican president, Abraham Lincoln. You know, of course, Abraham Lincoln was an abolitionist. These days, you know, we have prison states of America where, you know, anywhere up to 4% of a population can be involved in the Department of Justice and criminal, you know, system, you know, at any given time. You know, Idaho's up to 4% either in Department of Correction facilities or on probation or on parole, unable to vote, unable to carry their own firearms, unable to provide their own self-protection. You know, 4% of the population, that's a significant portion of the population. You know, there's other states with similar circumstances, similar situations. The thing is the libertarian president, that would involve the entirety of the United States recognizing that liberty should be a primary driver here in the United States. You know, I don't see us actually getting a libertarian president. I do see us ending up with a libertarian Congress eventually, you know, one state at a time, realizing that, hey, it is possible. Third parties building a coalition as we start to step into this territory formerly occupied by two primary parties. You know, that said, what is the next party going to be? Is it going to be libertarian? Right? Only need 26% of the votes. The rest of the USA doesn't vote. Could happen. Well, let's see. Libertarian Party's been at it for 50 years now. Green Party been at it for what, 45? You know, third parties, they're looking tired, man. They're looking tired. Internal fighting, almost constantly. The bickering. Can't decide who's in charge. Can't decide what's going on. Can't decide, you know, what is our platform this week? Are we going to continue to support the libertarian platform as it was created 50 years ago? The ideals, the belief, you know, in a minimalist state, the idea that human rights belong to all. Yeah, well, there's an awful lot of libertarian candidates running this season who are a little off on what is liberty for all. Big on the liberty for me, big on the liberty for people that look like me, not so big on the liberty for all. Green Party, been running into their problems. What does the Forward Party represent? Well, Forward Party doesn't represent much of anything yet. Sort of a catch-all party. You want to run as an independent, but you can't be bothered to collect the petition signatures? Yeah. Come on, James. I don't know. What we export isn't liberty, folks. What we export is not liberty. We free oil. We do a lot of that. We are beginning to realize the mistake that while in Afghanistan, we didn't free more minerals, rare earth minerals, uranium, the other things that make our technology run, make our technology work. Things we should have been liberating while we were in Afghanistan for 20 friggin' years, that we turn around and just hand it over to China. 20 years of American sons and daughters living and dying in Afghanistan, supporting an architecture that eventually went to China. Yes. And that's what I'm worried about, Brandy. Another neoliberal centrist party. What is that? What does it represent? All I see is another version of the People's Party. They're talking big. They want to go big. But the People's Party didn't have the activists behind it. What it had was dark money that was being used to distract from the Green Party or the Libertarian Party, saying, "Look, just vote Democrat. One more year, one more cycle. Just vote Democrat. One more cycle. Honest. We'll have a good candidate for you in 2 years. Just vote that blue wave one more time." People's Party turned into a dead end. The Forward Party. It's interesting to see. I mean, it's not like we don't have nearly 100 different parties registered with the FEC. California itself has like about 30 of them all to themselves. Party for Socialization and Liberation, the Peace and Love Party, the Socialist Party of America. I swear, we had 7 socialist candidates running last election for president. I don't know how you end up with 7 socialist candidates who all managed to get enough ballot access that they could have won if somebody actually voted for them. But there were 7 socialist candidates on one ticket or another, in 2020. 7 of them. Now all together, none of them got as much as the Libertarian candidate did, but there were still 7 of them. Yeah, Andrew Yang, he flip-flops. He's a proven opportunist. Just as much as the person who started, the People's Party was a proven opportunist. The individuals who headline the People's Party, proven opportunists. We're looking at Andrew Yang doing the same thing again. Just vote blue just one more time, and we'll have a good candidate for you in 2 years. There's people that are interested in it. $7 billion from Afghanistan gave to Ukraine. $7 billion. We're actually going to get into that a little bit later. Reason why is because that's a little bit later. So, but Liz Cheney dumped the incumbents, folks. It's something that we actually need to look at. Okay, Liz Cheney's replacement isn't any better. That said, at least it creates an opening for the opponent in the general election. Now, next thing I want to bring up, okay, Florida. I know. I've been chatting an awful lot about abortion rights, across the United States. Yeah, and back to the whole Roe versus Wade, what it is involved as far as politics go. Where we moved in from neoliberal and neoconservative and where they merge in that pro-war party, as well as the things that we need to do in the United States of America in order to facilitate global warfare. Like, we need more kids to fill slots, step into combat boots and fill uniforms and point guns at brown people somewhere else in the world. Okay. And that's where we are. That's one of the reasons why, certain elements within the United States insisted on this. We need a greater supply of domestic infants. We need a new class of poor in order to draft into the all volunteer army, or we will actually have to initiate a draft for the global war that is coming. Yeah. Welcome to where neocons and neolibs actually come together. Now, the thing is this is a short-term fix. The reason why is because once you allow the state into reproductive rights issues, where they are saying you have to have children. And once you let the state decide whether or not an individual can or cannot, well, in this case, decide that a person has to have the child, the next step is deciding which people get to have children, which people will be forcefully sterilized for the greater good of the community, which people, how many children you will actually be allowed to have. The forced birth programs is just proto eugenics. It's one of those things that we will eventually get into. We will be deciding who can reproduce. What are the terms? What are the requirements? Who's going to be healthy enough to actually produce healthy children for the future of the world? Who's going to be qualified, to make better children for the world rather than a better world for the children? Yeah. One of the things Mike likes to bring up is, dominionism, authoritarianism, control of the people. It's the last aphrodisiac, last dopamine, reserve for the authoritarian class. Here we are coming up on the end of the me generation, the end of the baby boomers. There's no drug left that they haven't tried that gives them the high that control does, that gives them the high of being able to point a platoon of 18-year-old kids at a target somewhere else in the world and tell them to kill or die. That's an interesting thing, James. A lot of it is right now we see it happening, but we don't know how to stop it. We don't know how to prevent it. We don't know who is the person. Back after the Civil War, John Wilkes Booth took a bullet to one man. He shot President Abraham Lincoln. Problem was that didn't have the results that John Wilkes Booth was desiring. Not by any stretch of the imagination. We've gone through that process with the one person, that one figurehead, that one individual that represented all things that were evil in our nation. And every time that happened, the assassination of Duke Ferdinand, the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, several of the other U.S. presidentialists, the assassinations of a number of U.S. governors, targeted assassinations of foreign leaders. We've continued to have that problem, and that no matter who that one person was, it didn't stop what was coming. It's one of the problems. The Second Amendment is not going to solve that problem. What is the Second Amendment? That's the right to make sure those grievances are heard, make sure those grievances are understood. Okay. We still have our first. We are still talking. I am talking about you. I'm, you know, trying to convey to me the things I feel, the things I think are important, and to that degree, I got my First Amendment. You know, I'd show you my Second Amendment rights, but I'm afraid that's going to get me into trouble the way YouTube and things do different things these days. So I'm going to avoid that particular bravado. Um, and yeah, you're right. American foreign policy is murder someone into compliance. We're in a situation where Henry Kissinger right now is afraid of American foreign policy. Henry fucking Kissinger is afraid of American U.S. policy, foreign policy. He thinks we're overstepping. This was the man who orchestrated decades upon decades of, war in Central America, in the Middle East, U.S. involvement in so many different international, war crimes. He's going, dude, I'm scared. Okay. This is a man like 80 years old. He's got like 3 or 4 years left in his life. He's afraid. And what's going to happen is going to happen. There is no one person. There is no one golden bullet that's going to stop what's coming, folks. This is about personal. This is about personal relationships, community building, community relationships. This is about the activism at the lowest level. This is about knowing who your neighbors are, knowing who can grow, who can fix your rototiller, who can manufacture gas, who can create the conversion kit so that the oil can be turned into diesel to run, whatever modified gas engine, conversion process you can get. Who is it that can build an alcohol fueled engine in order to make sure that your automation continues to run? These are the things, Operation Paperclip. And there's actually more and more deeper and deeper into that. That's a completely different issue. Post World War II, we gave criminals full access to the US government. We gave German criminals full access to the US government. Of course, we didn't see them as criminals. Our leadership didn't see them as criminals as post World War II, because thing is up until World War II, we were still doing the same things that the Germans started doing. Our moral values were already compromised well before World War II happened. So we didn't see what Germany was doing as all that bad, except that they wanted to be in control. And we didn't want them having control when we could have it. Hence the situation we're in. 50 years of the United States of America being the unilateral global power, able to decide in and of ourselves without the input from any of the other nations what was and was not going to happen anywhere in the world, which nations were going to be converted from communism to democracy, which countries were going to receive American freedom in exchange for oil. And well, we're dealing with the collapse of that right now. Reason why is because China and Russia have gone into union together to create a new global reserve currency, and it's taking off. The Russian ruble, the Chinese whatever yuan, they are currently. That's got to be something else. The yuan's Japanese. Joint venture, rare earth mineral backed global reserve currency. Okay, and this goes back to the Brexit Accords. The idea that America was supposed to be using gold, or at least gold and silver, in order to back the currency, the global reserve currency of the world, right up until 1972 when Nixon went off. What is communism? Do we even know anymore? We got an awful lot of hype on an awful lot of fronts about what is and is not communism, what is and is not capitalism. It's all, nobody knows. They're all words that people use to describe something they hate. I hate the American economic system because it's corporatism, or because it's capitalism, or because it's communism, or because it's socialism. It's a mixed economy. We got a little bit of everything, and it's converged in a way that is actually bad rather than good. And of course, which kind of communism? None of it's the real communism, though, because we haven't tried real communism yet. Right? You can't wave a Nazi flag in Germany. What kind of freedom of speech is that? Okay. Anyway, derailed. Back to the issue of domestic supply of infants. Florida right now, there is a 16-year-old girl who, at 10 weeks of being aware, her pregnancy was along at 10 weeks. She's 16. She is in the foster care system. She went before a judge to make her argument in order to receive an abortion in the state of Florida. Okay, now as a ward of the state, she can't actually leave the state to seek an abortion in another state. She has to request the state of Florida to give her permission. As a ward of the state, because she has no parent, she has to make her own argument for the case. She went before the judge, presented her case, and was denied. Okay, this is a 16-year-old girl, 10 weeks pregnant at this point, wants an abortion so that she doesn't have to have the child, 16, remember that. Most states, that's still statutory. I'm not sure what the Romeo-Juliet clause in the state of Florida, but this is a minor who has been determined by the state she's actually too immature, too young to decide for herself whether or not she should have an abortion. Yeah, well, we know that, James. Yeah, 16-year-olds do not have rights. And that's one of those things that's interesting. The idea of what is a right, what is a human right? At what age do you receive a human right? Right now, we got people who claim a fetus that is still dependent on the mother to eat, breathe, and sleep for this fetus. Okay? That fetus has more rights than American women right now. That fetus has more rights than American minors right now. And it can't even put together 2 brain cells. Okay. 10 weeks, the 16-year-old has a heartbeat. The fetus that she's pregnant with, technically something passes for a heartbeat. And it's not really a heart yet that's beating, but there's electrical impulses going between a couple of cells that will eventually form the heart. But yeah, 16-year-old girl, I hope she has a beating heart. If she doesn't have a beating heart, that fetus, is going to be in a world of hurt here, if, that situation screwed up. Okay, now another issue that we got with the abortion rights here in the States, Missouri. Okay, Missouri, right now, woman is 10 weeks along. She's been identified that there is a congenital birth defect with the fetus that she is currently carrying. She's being denied an abortion by the state for a child that will not survive birth. Again, these were not problems before Roe versus Wade, because a doctor could look at the situation and go, you know what? Okay, she's a minor. She doesn't need the child. The child has a congenital birth defect. It doesn't have a skull to protect its brain. It's probably just better we terminate the pregnancy, so that she can pursue a new pregnancy, if that's what she's wanting to do, and have a child without the congenital birth defect that guarantees a very, very short lifespan. You know, this is what we're dealing with right now in the United States post Roe versus Wade. This idea that there are literally these horror stories coming out. And we have people in America going, no, she's got to have the baby. It's her fault for getting pregnant. Yep, that's God's curse. Baby without a skull, she's got to give birth to it. God made that happen for her. She's got to live with it. You know, we have this ability to create compassion. We have this ability to provide saving medical procedures. We have this ability to create a better world for these women so these women can get back to their lives. Okay. Become the mothers that they eventually want to be, if that's what they want to be. Become, you know, a member of the community, a member of the society. Dude, Epstein didn't kill himself. You know, we're still dealing with that issue. That's one of those problems. You know, and yeah, America is in a sad state. You know, we have situations that could be medically corrected. We have situations where medical compassion could fix an untenable situation. And we've chosen by law, by violence of the state, that the untenable position will be sustained under threat of violence. Okay. It's one of the reasons why we don't like legislation. We do not like restrictions, regulations that prevent compassion, that prevent appropriate and timely medical care, that prevent an individual from making the best choices for their life based on the information that's available to them at the time. This is why we don't fight for legislation. You know, and this is a situation. Congenital birth defects. You know, in your friend's case, it was brain damage, stillborn. You know, I got into a long discussion today with somebody whose wife had a stillborn child at 8 months. You know, American prison state of birthing rights. You know, different states, you know, right now they're already looking at legislation trying to prevent movement. You know, where you have a 16-year-old child, you know, who's pregnant and a ward of the state, and the guardian who is responsible for their wealth will not, cannot transport them across state lines for medical care that cannot be provided inside the state. She is a ward of the state, and the state has decided she will have that child. There's nothing she can do about it. At 16, she will be made a mother under threat of violence in the state of Florida. Yeah, 8 months is usually when the congenital defects are noticed, are understood and found out, whether it's heart, brain, you know, or something else. You know, mother as a life support device is incredible. It's amazing. The idea that a woman is capable of sustaining life for up to 8 months, despite congenital birth defects in a child that would kill them upon birth, upon, you know, the cutting of the umbilical cord. Yeah, and she is still able to sustain that life right up until the very, you know, it's incredible. It's amazing. You know, and she shouldn't have to go through with that. You know, she should not have to go through, you know, 5, 6 months knowing that she's just going to give birth to a corpse. That is not who we should be, by any stretch of the imagination. Definitely not who we should be as Americans. It's currently what we're dealing with the current state of birthing rights, reproductive rights, women's rights, human bodily autonomy. And let's understand that right now. We make it a women's issue. It's not. It is a human issue. It is a humanity issue. Trans rights are not trans rights. It's a human right. Every one of these little issues that we look at and we say, intersectionality, that's a woman's issue. It's a body dysmorphia issue. That's trans rights issues. No, that's a black issue. No, that's a Latin issue. That's an indigenous issue. No, dude. That's one of the things we need to get over. These are human rights issues. This is human bodily autonomy. Right now, it's a women's issue. What's it going to be next week? What are you going to do when it's a woman president who decides that mandatory castration at 16 years old is appropriate? It's too late, man. You've already given the state permission to interfere with reproductive rights. Yeah, we went back to the 18th century, neocolonization, relearning that. But the thing is, as long as we aren't fighting for everybody's rights, 100% bodily autonomy, it doesn't matter whether it's black, white, female, male, indigenous, it doesn't matter. We let the state interfere with the human rights of one person. We've given them permission to interfere with the human rights of everybody. Goes back to medical choice. We talk about medical cannabis, medical marijuana. Okay. This is a human right. It's a natural plant. God gave us the plants to grow, to benefit from. Gave us mushrooms. These things are now illegal. Also, that PharmaCorp can make a profit off of something they manufacture out of petrol. And yeah, they should be allowed to make the choice. Absolutely, Brandy. And yeah, America is if it ever was, if America ever was civilized, it definitely is no longer. Okay. Iraq, it's an issue. Depleted uranium dust all over the Iraqi battlefields, all over the Iraqi space, airspace, ground, in their fertilizer, in their, causing birth defects. Agent Orange in Vietnam, causing birth defects. Post-Taliban, post-Trump Afghanistan, birth defects, human rights violations because of what we've done in the process of nation building. Is poison the environment and poison the world of the people that we've left. U.S. funds human rights all over the world, women's rights, but and we've seen that. We've seen organizations that we funded for human rights turn around and divert those funds for terrorism. USAID funds diverted to support terrorism. We've seen it time and time again. We talk about shutting down these NGOs who turn around and provide funding that we give them to terrorists. It never happens. Or if it does, we just turn around and institute a new NGO that performs the exact same function all over again. As long as we are giving the U.S. government money to invest in foreign organizations, foreign countries, foreign nations, we will continue to see U.S. foreign policy supporting global terrorism and neocolonialism around the world. Until you dump the incumbents that have been supporting that for the past 50 years, whether it's incumbents like Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, Schumer, Boehner, from Clinton era, as long as we're continually supporting chicken hawk politicians and the war pigs that continue to call for war, more war, our money, our resources, our children will continue to go fight those wars. Whether it's in Afghanistan, whether it's in Iraq, whether it's even Ukraine. We will put boots on the ground in Ukraine. We will put American sons and daughters on the ground in Ukraine, fighting to preserve God knows what. God knows what. And it goes back to this issue of how do we make sure we have enough children in the future? What is our domestic infant supply to support the war machine? We're looking at the fallout from that. It's time to fix it. We need to get back to a situation. Yeah, I'm not going to bring that one up, James. It's a good one. You guys watching James on YouTube, find what he's got to say. But I'm not touching that one, James. Global population here in the United States. Decentralization, distributed architecture. Find the networks, find the organizations that will support feeding your communities. Okay. Pay attention to what's going on. Find a way to make yourself food independent, protection independent. Whether it's through community organizing, we do it, community organizing, or something else. Start understanding you will no longer have the federal government available at your beck and call to send $1 billion to your state to fix whatever problem your governor has created, or the corporations your governor has invited into your state to fix. We got that problem, and it's something that actually needs to be dealt with. Now, on to the third topic of the evening. Welcome to 87,000 new IRS agents. Okay. These aren't actually new IRS agents because I think Trump fired 87,000 or somewhere around there. But we are back in that situation where now we are returning to normal levels of agents for the IRS. Yes. Interesting. I'm getting pinged. Some of these people don't actually understand I'm doing a podcast right now. And thank you, Sandy. Appreciate that. Okay, 87,000. We're going back to pre-Trump levels IRS agents, going back to pre-COVID level IRS agents. When the IRS agency was actually asked whether or not they were going to be able to pay for the 87,000 new IRS agents, the head of the agency literally said, I believe we can make a profit. Meaning that not only will they be earning the wages for the 87,000 new agents over the next 5 years, they will continue to add revenue above and beyond those costs for the near term. Now, there's different disputes as to whether or not they're actually going to honor their promise to only go after the big guys, or whether or not they're going to actually target people who are making significantly less, simply because recouping money from people who don't have accountants and lawyers to fight in order to retain the funds that they did not properly report. Good one, James. I will go ahead and make sure that and sound down enough, so at least it won't be ping. Who the actual target is, going back to pre-Trump levels of IRS operations. We all know historically the IRS has never targeted the top 1% when it comes to audits. Yeah, James, we're on IRS now. And based on the promises that have been made throughout the concept of the Inflation Reduction Act, where we now have income tax enforcement officers who've been requested to make sure they have the ability to carry a gun and are willing to shoot people if necessary. Yeah, they sort of scrubbed that off their job application list after that particular thing went viral. Wherever it was up for a little bit, IRS now hiring 87,000 new agents. One citizen, one must be capable of carrying a firearm, and one must be willing to shoot someone while serving a warrant. Yeah. IRS, CIA, adding your 8th cat. 8? What are you doing with 8 cats, Brandy? It's all right. I got a friend who's up to 10. She just had one of the cats give birth, so up 4 kittens that love to chew on everything. Yeah, so now we're back in a situation where we are going through the highest rates of inflation in the United States since probably the 1970s. We are talking Nixon, Ford, Carter era misery index. Okay, now I'm actually talking the real misery index. That percentage of the pop workforce that is participating compared to the rate of inflation based on the method of measurements used back in 1970 and 1980, not the new ones that minimize what's happening, but by the old standard. The misery index is at an all-time high. Percentage of the population in the United States that is non-workforce participating is at an all-time high. The inflation, based on the 1970 style calculations, is at an all-time high. We are increasing taxes. We are hiring new tax collectors with the authorization to use deadly force at will under the header of Homeland Security. We are on the verge of World War III. We have troop deployments globally. Idaho just sent 600 troops to the Middle East. Yes, our National Guard just deployed to the Middle East. Operation Spartan Shield. 600 of Idaho's best and brightest sent off to the sandbox for 6 months, or I'm not sure what their actual deployment time is. What? You haven't done that yet, James? You're slacking, man. Don't worry, neither have I. I honestly don't know what I'm going to do when the world collapses. It's my retirement plan, mind you. What is your retirement plan, Joe? Societal collapse. And find myself a nice little property with enough grass so that I can grow my garden, enough lawn space, grow my garden, and just squat. Who knows? James, man, 33? Whew. Okay. So let's get back to the issue, because you're not eating cats anytime soon. Okay. At least not for the next 6 months. Okay. No eating cats, no eating dogs. These are still pets. Don't eat your she-goats because they make milk. Okay. Don't eat the she-goats. Milk. And lawn maintenance. No, I don't think it does. I do not think it does. No, the IRS job does not come with a house and a garden. They're probably making it. Well, no. Obvious. I honestly think with the wages they're offering the IRS agents, the intro level, GS5, I think is the current level that they're entering at. Wages for GS5, they're still working homeless here in the United States. I don't think they can actually afford to buy their own homes or even rent on those wages. Mhm. How's that for a conundrum situation? I'm an IRS. I'm here to audit your taxes. And yes, I'm homeless and living out of my car, living in a van down by the river with my coworker here. Um, this is one of those things. It's the creeping authoritarianism that exists in the United States. Okay, every one of these things, every one of these organizations, every one of these institutions, these are American institutions. Okay, the IRS, it is an American institution since 1940s, 1930, whenever it was it started. Okay, the IRS, it's an American institution. Department of Education, an American institution. Our public schools, American institutions. The police, American institutions. You know, and we've slowly watched the creep of authoritarian turn peacekeepers, those people who settle disputes. You know, we've turned peacekeepers into law enforcement. We've gone from making sure people don't kill each other to making sure people aren't selling cigarette loosies, on street corners in New York. We've gone from, um, what was essentially an on your honor to contribute to the war effort to mandatory audits. Our education system, was originally send kids to school to learn and develop curiosity. Give them an opportunity to learn things that you, as a parent, couldn't teach them. Make sure that there was that school marm there in the schoolhouse, capable of teaching them the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. Because what you learned as a kid wasn't quite enough to get them by in the world that they were growing up in. It's one thing trying to figure out how to run water for, 5 hectares of land. You can pretty much eyeball it. Now you're trying to figure out micro calculations for that circuit board on the computer. Meanwhile, technology is going up, healthcare is going up. The ability to devote resources to a single child or two, because you could guarantee the longevity of said child. You're part of an urban family, 2.3 children. A replacement for each of you. When you had a lifespan to make sure that each of them had a replacement for them. Now, you no longer had to have 12 children in order to run the child labor that kept the farm functioning and capable of feeding the rest of the community on 40 acres. You now had technology running the farm. The one kid who could go in with, the widget and stick it into the thingamajig, and next thing you know, that John Deere tractor's just been hijacked and you can actually repair it. You don't need 12 kids to do that anymore. You need one with the tech smarts in order to get past the security so that you can get the John Deere tractor back up and operational so that your harvest comes in on time. You don't need 5 kids for that. You just need one anymore. Here's the problem. Mom and dad are only making 2.4. If every mom and dad is only making 2.4, there's not enough children to die for the war machine. Go forth and procreate for the greater glory of God. Sort of rings different when our president is our current God King. Congress, our priests. Go forth and procreate for the greater glory of God. Mean none, folks. Take care of yourself. Take care of your families. Yeah. Things are not all doom and gloom. There's a lot of joy to be found in the world right now. You have your families, you have your children, you have your loved ones, you have communities, you have your neighbors. You have the ability to talk with the clerk at the convenience store when you go in to pick up your snacks. You go in to pick up your corn syrup. Yeah, you can almost see it. Gotta love the green screen effect. There's still a lot of joy to be found in the world, a lot of potential. Even in the worst of the days to come, still have family, friends, and loved ones. It's not all doom and gloom. And you still can't be complacent. Take care of yourselves, folks. And remember, family, friends, community. As long as you got those three, you can make anything happen. Stay safe. Yeah, James. Yes, Andy. I understand it. A lot of the millennials, a whole lot of the next Gen Z, Gen AA, have decided they're done. They're anti-natalists. They are not going to bring children into the world that we have left them. Doesn't mean we don't have time to create a world where they might change their mind. Love you guys.